Sæl og blessuð. Welcome back to Icelandic for Foreigners. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the difference between strong and weak adjectives. If you've ever gone and looked up the forms of an Icelandic adjective, then you know that there are a lot of different forms. One thing you may have noticed is that every adjective has a strong bending and a weak bending. Both the strong and weak forms of the adjective have a different form for masculine, feminine, and neuter, singular and plural, and the four grammatical cases, nominative, accusative, dative, and genitive. So for the strong bendings, we have all of those different forms, which are 24 in total. And for the weak bendings, we also have all those forms, which are 24 in total. For every strong adjective, there is a corresponding weak adjective. So this raises the question, when do we use the strong bending and when do we use the weak bending when we're speaking or writing? Now there are two things that we need to learn first. First is we need to understand the difference between attributive and predicative adjectives. And next we need to learn about the difference between definite and indefinite nouns. So let's start first with attributive and predicative adjectives. Predicative adjectives are when the adjective comes after a verb. It's almost always separated from the noun that it describes. Here are some English sentences, for example. The book is green. Green is describing book, but it's not right next to the word book. It's separated by the word is. The next sentence, the man seems drunk. Drunk is describing man, but the two words aren't right next to each other. Same with the students became tired. Tired is describing the students, but it's following a verb. Now, that's different from attributive position, which is when the adjective comes directly before the noun it describes. At least in English, this is how it works, right? We put the adjective before the noun when we say green book, or drunk man, or tired students. In a lot of languages, the adjective comes after the noun that it describes, but in English and in Icelandic, it comes before. This is called attributive position. All right, next let's talk about the difference between definite and indefinite nouns. A definite noun is a noun that has a definite article, a demonstrative pronoun, a possessive pronoun, or there is some sort of genitive ownership. Now I'm going to talk about each of these ones in turn. Now, a definite article, in English, we say the. In Icelandic, we add a definite article ending. Hundur, a dog, becomes hundurinn, the dog. Taska, bag, becomes taskan, the bag. And land, country, becomes landið, the country. Now, in Icelandic, these forms on the left are the indefinite form of the noun, and these forms on the right are a definite form of the noun. Definite means that we know which one we're talking about. We have the article which tells us we're not just talking about any dog or any bag, we're talking about the dog and the bag. But there are also other ways that a noun can be definite in Icelandic. The next way is with demonstrative pronouns. That's þessi and sá and all their different forms. Þessi and all its different forms mean this, and sá and all its different forms mean that. And anytime we use one of these with a noun, it makes it definite. For example, hundur, a dog, becomes þessi hundur, which means this dog. Taska becomes þessi taska, and land becomes þetta land. Now, all of these ones on the left side are indefinite, and all of these ones on the right side are definite. The next way you can form definite nouns is through the use of possessive pronouns. These are the possessive pronouns in English. In Icelandic, we have min and all its forms, þinn and all its forms, hans and sinn and all the different forms of sinn, hennar, þess, okkar, ykkar, and þeirra. So let's look at some examples. Hundur, a dog, becomes hundurinn minn, my dog. Taska becomes taskan mín, my bag. Land becomes landið mitt, my country. All these words on the left side are indefinite. All the words on the right side are definite. And the last kind of definiteness that we'll look at is when we have genitive ownership. This is when we have a noun that's possessing a different noun. For example, hundur becomes hundur Jóns, which means Jón's dog, or the dog of Jóns. Jón, sorry. Taska becomes taska konunar, for example, which means the bag of the woman, or the woman's bag. Land can become land Evrópu, a land or a country of Europe. All these words on the left side are the indefinite form, and on the right side they are all definite. So now that we know the difference between, first of all, attributive and predicative adjectives, and now that we know the difference between definite and indefinite nouns, we can learn the rules for strong and weak adjectives. So here's rule number 1. When the adjective is in predicative position, we always use the strong adjective. So here are the English sentences that we looked at. Let's look at the equivalent Icelandic sentences. Bókin græn. The book is green, and græn is the strong form of the adjective. Maðurinn virðist fullur. The man seems drunk. And nemendurnir urðu þreyttir, which means the students became tired. Now, the thing that you'll notice about all of these is all of these adjectives, first of all, they're all in the strong form. Second, you might notice that they are also all in the nominative form. And this can be expected in a lot of times when we have an adjective in predicative position, because it's usually connected to the noun that it's describing with vera or verða, which are verbs that have nominative on both sides. So a lot of the time when we have an adjective in predicative position, it's going to be nominative, and it will always be strong. All right, rule number 2 is a little bit more complicated. When the adjective is in attributive position, we use strong adjectives with indefinite nouns and weak adjectives with definite nouns. So let's look at some examples. Hundur hljóp yfir götuna. This means a dog ran over the road. There's no adjective here, so let's add an adjective in. Stór hundur hljóp yfir götuna. A big dog ran over the road. So now we have an adjective in there. And we'll notice here that this is in attributive position because it's connected to the noun that it's describing. And hundur is indefinite. It's a dog, not a particular dog, which means we're going to use the strong form of the adjective. Let's look at another example. Hundurinn hljóp yfir götuna. Now this is almost the same sentence, except now we have the definite article ending, so it means the dog ran over the road. So now when we add an adjective, stóri hundurinn hljóp yfir götuna. The big dog ran over the road. And now that we're talking about a definite noun, we're going to use the weak form of the adjective. Let's look at some more examples like this. Rauð taska liggur á borðinu. A red bag is lying on the table. Compare that to Rauða taskan mín liggur á borðinu, which means my red bag is lying on the table. So now in the top sentence, we have an indefinite noun, a red bag. So we use the strong form of the adjective. In the bottom sentence, we have my red bag, which is definite, so we use the weak form. So up to this point, all the examples that we've looked at have been the nominative adjectives, but this same rule applies to adjectives in other cases as well. For example, ég talaði við fullan mann í strætó, which means I talked with a drunk man on the bus. Compare that to ég talaði við fulla mannin í strætó, which means I talked with the drunk man on the bus. Now in the top sentence we have the weak form of the adjective, the strong form of the adjective rather, because we have an indefinite noun. And in the bottom sentence we have the weak form of the adjective because it's a definite noun. All right, one more example. Þau hjálpuðu nýkomnum flóttamönnum að fá hæli, which means they helped newly arrived refugees obtain asylum. Compare that to Þau hjálpuðu nýkomnu flóttamönnunum að fá hæli, which means they helped the newly arrived refugees obtain asylum. So in the bottom sentence we have the, so we're talking about specific refugees, so we use the weak form of the adjective. But on the top, refugees is indefinite, so we use the strong form of the adjective. All right, so here's just a quick recap of everything that we've learned. When the adjective is in predicative position, we use the strong form of the adjective. When it's in the attributive position, we may use either the strong or weak. We use the strong adjective when the noun that it's describing is indefinite, and we use the weak adjective when the noun we're describing is definite. Now, before this video ends, there are two things that I wanted to tell you to watch out for. I meant to mention them earlier, but I'll just have to mention them now because I forgot. The first one is I mentioned that usually the adjectives in attributive position are right next to the noun that they describe, whereas in predicative position, they're usually separated by the verb. But they don't actually need to be separated. For example, in this sentence, bokin goes. Now, in this sentence, we have inversion because it's a question. This means, is the book good? So here we see that the adjective is actually right next to the noun that it's describing, but we're still going to use the strong form of the noun because this is still technically predicative position because we have the verb. Even though it's not between them, it's still connecting them. One of the other things that I said earlier is that when you have an adjective in predicative form, it's almost always in the nominative form, but it doesn't actually have to be. And I could probably make an entire video just on this subject, but I'm not going to right now. But here's the example. Hún gerði mig reiðan, which means she made me angry. And the rule here, this is kind of advanced stuff, but the rule here is that if you have one noun making another noun into a different kind of adjective, then the adjective is going to match the case of the object of that sentence, and it's also going to be the strong form of the adjective. Reiðan is the accusative masculine singular form of reiður. Like I said, that's pretty advanced stuff, so if that just went right over your head, don't worry about it for now. Try and focus just on the difference between the predicative and attributive sentences that we were talking about earlier. Anyway, I hope that this video was helpful, and please let me know if you have any questions. Adjectives are probably one of the most complex parts of Icelandic, at least trying to use them when you're speaking because there are so many different forms, but I hope that this made it a little bit easier, at least to get you started. Let me know if you have any questions. Bless, bless.